Hello everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma 231 here, back in day, talk about Oshi no Ko, chapter number 156. This chapter's titled... Okay, before we read out the chapter title here, I have done my research into this chapter title, and cannot for the life of me figure out how you're supposed to say this chapter title. And honestly, I do not understand what this chapter title means. To just say first, the most obvious reading of this chapter title is meme, as it is spelled M-E-M-E. But there is some weird capitalization stuff in here that makes it a bit interesting because, for instance, the first three letters are capitalized, which are they're M-E-M, which also spells Mem, because this chapter is about Mem-Chos, we'll get to here in a few minutes. But also, you could read it as like me, you could read it as meme, you could read it as mem-e. I just don't get what this chapter title is supposed to be getting across in the context of this chapter. For the sake of simplicity, I am good with saying this chapter title is meme, and just with that mem sort of like more emphasis on like meme. Yeah, it's weird. I don't quite understand it, and like I said, I looked online for probably about 20 minutes, going on all of the various Oshi no Ko forums and rereading this chapter twice, just sort of take a look and see like, okay, has anybody figured this out? And to what I've seen, I haven't found anything. So if you do know, just go and drop it down in the description so I can actually sort of understand this and maybe sort of make an addendum to the video later on, or like do a pinned comment or something if I figure it out. So yeah, I'm just very confused here, and Oshi no Ko truly has not gotten me this confused since last chapter, whenever there was so much dialogue that I didn't know where it was coming from, so it was hard to actually recap and talk about, but this chapter doesn't have too many of those glaring issues with it. But yeah, before we hop into this chapter right here, of course we need to talk about what happened last time on Oshi no Ko, and realistically, nothing with this chapter has to do with last chapter, because last chapter was sort of the fallout after the two twins went and talked with their father Hikaru, and all of that went through and happened, and then at the end of the chapter, we sort of learned the big reveal of, alright, Nino is sort of the final boss of Oshi no Ko, as she was helping Hikaru pretty much murder everybody, so she played a pivotal role in that. And this chapter coming from 155, which was of course that big reveal and sort of end of that sort of arc, is a jump because this chapter is entirely about Mem-Cho and has nothing to do with that. And I see a lot of people online very upset about, oh boy, this chapter has nothing to do with the actual plot. But like, what do you expect? Did you expect the final plot to be over and then we're going to get like 3 chapters wrapping up all of the different characters? I mean, I would probably rather have this here so Oshi no Ko sort of goes out on that high note of finishing out the story and have maybe like 2 chapters left, because of course we've got a chapter for Mem-Cho here. We probably need a chapter for Mel, but if we don't get a chapter for Mel, I'm going to be very disappointed because Mel is probably my favorite character in Oshi no Ko. So we need a chapter for him. We probably need a chapter for all of the people of the La 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 troupe, and all of the other various characters that we met, Frill and all of these other people. So a lot of people were upset about this chapter. I'm not at all. But without further ado, I have rambled on long enough about the name of this chapter and everything else. So yeah, let's hop right into it. Again, this is chapter number 156 of Oshi no Ko, titled Meme. And this chapter starts off, we see that Frill and Mem-Cho are out going to do something together, right? As from what we sort of get from context clues, it seems like Mem-Cho has come to pick up Frill from presumably her house or somewhere else. As we see the first lines of the chapter are Frill commenting on Mem-Cho's car. As Frill's just like, oh man, it's a really cute car, Mem-Cho, right? And Mem-Cho says like, oh yeah, my wish came true and I was actually able to buy it, right? And I really like this because this is now 2 characters in Oshi no Ko that have sort of had prominent moments where they get a car, because of course there was the whole situation with Taiki's car, which I think is still probably the funniest Oshi no Ko joke that I can recall at this point. Now, I don't remember if there's like a really, really funny joke during the Dig Deep arc, because honestly, I don't remember most of what happened during the Dig Deep arc, but Yeah, the car jokes are always funny, especially like the ones that happen in Chainsaw Man and a bunch of other prominent anime manga series. Either way here, Mem-Cho just says like, hey, like, yeah, my wish came true and I was able to buy this car. And Froze is like, oh man, well, you've just been super busy, right? Like, when did you have time to go out and get your license? And Mem-Cho sort of just like dodged her eye around. It's like, well, I did that a long time ago, but we sort of cut away from there because, of course, nobody else really knows Mem-Cho's age besides for the few people at like Strawberry Productions and then become Nahachi. Nobody really else knows all of that stuff there. But we eventually see that Mem-Cho's driving the car and that Frill is in the passenger seat and they're driving somewhere. We actually don't know where they are driving, but it never really gets explained. But we see that Frill's here and she's like, oh, hey, by the way, it seems like that tabloid reporter is following you. And she's like, are you okay with all of that going on here? And Mem-Cho's just like, huh? Like, what are you talking about? And Frill's just like, well, you've noticed that car behind you has been following us for like the past few turns, right? And Mem-Cho's just like, no. But she even sort of mentions like, hey, I'd expect nothing less from you, Frill. Like, you're constantly being stalked by all these tabloids and so on, right? But Frill says like, well, not necessarily. These reporters have been following you. And she's like, they were already there when you came to pick me up. And Mem-Cho's like, what are you talking about? Which sort of leads that thing to, yeah, Mem-Cho stopped by to pick Frill up for them to go do something, but I don't think we ever necessarily figure out what that is. But Mem-Cho's like, hey, why me? Why are they following me? Like, what's so good about me? And Frill just is like, hey, well, you've got to think, like, your fame has been skyrocketing recently, and very newly popular celebrities are the least cautious and easiest for reporters to end up targeting, right? And she even just goes on to say, like, hey, it feels like the number of reporters has increased lately also, and she pretty much just says, like, hey, it's like a writer for a tabloid hires amateur writers from the internet and uses human wave attacks to sort of stalk a client, as we sort of see this sort of weird flowchart. We see, like, a tabloid hire writers, and the writers talk to citizens on the internet to sort of get dirt and all of this interesting information on other people, right? It's a little bit of an interesting idea that she's going for here, and one that does make sense, but I don't know. I don't really get this. I don't know if this is me being weird. Like, yeah, this is my favorite part of Oshinoko, is this type of talk right here, right? Frill continues to saying, like, hey, these kind of people have no professionalism, so they enter private property without a care in the world and calmly spread frank information online, which of course is a big nuisance, and even if we report them, the police won't take action and the law won't protect us either, right? Continues on saying the world is becoming an increasingly difficult place to protect the private lives and peace of various celebrities. And that is sort of where we end off this conversation with Frill here, as it seems like her purpose in this chapter, I mean, we sort of get highlighted on a few more characters in this chapter mainly. It starts off with Frill, then there's a talk with Ruby, and then Mem-Cho does her own thing in the middle of the chapter, and then we end off with her talking to Kana. And it seems like each of these characters sort of have a reason and something to say about what Mem-Cho is going to do later in this chapter, and it sort of just seems like Frill is set into place here to sort of be the character that says, hey, this is the problem, I am telling you about it now, why it is a big bad deal, and why you need to fix it, sort of as we'll get to here later in this chapter. And, I mean, I understand because Frill is like, oh man, she's the big, famous, popular actor, and of course she'd know all about all of this, but I don't know, I've never really been that big a fan of Frill's character. I mean, yeah, she's interesting. She does indeed have a role, but yeah, it's an alright portion of the chapter. As we'll sort of get into my thoughts on this chapter, sort of that, yes, it is a good, decent, and fine chapter, all things considered, but it's just alright. But after this conversation with Frill, where she sort of says all this stuff like, hey, your peace and everything is going down the drain because you're now famous, right? We eventually cut to Mem-Cho at her house or apartment, or yeah, she lives in an apartment. We see her in her apartment here, right? And we see that she's just laying in her bed, She's in her pajamas with all of her stuffed animals around her. And she's just like, man, I never thought something like this would end up happening to me. And she's like, I mean, I don't even have a boyfriend or any, like, shady relationships. And she's like, I don't have anything to hide. But as she's sort of thinking this, she's like, oh, wait, I do have my age to hide. Because, of course, to the public, she has always been broadcast as 20 years old, when in actuality, we all know that she is actually 27 years old. And we sort of get this sort of update here. And, of course, we know a lot of time has passed since Frill, or not since Frill, since Mem-Cho ended up joining Become Nahachi, and at that point she was 26 years old. So at this point, it's been about a year and a half, which means that she's probably getting very close to also 28 at the same time. So, but either way, Mem-Cho just starts thinking like, hey, people who've known me for a long time are probably very aware of this, and of course those who've known me from high school are aware of it too. And she starts to think, why were those cars following me? Did someone leak it? Is that why all of these reporters are keeping an eye on me? And we get this very interesting panel. Like, it's not quite in silhouette, but there's sort of no added I don't really know how to explain this panel, but it's pretty much just Mem-Cho's face. It's the panel on the bottom of page 5, I think. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah. It's a panel on the bottom of page 5, where we sort of just see Mem-Cho looking a very interesting way, and sort of just like very blank expression, just sort of having very deep shaded eyes, looking up into the sort of sky. It's a very interesting thing, right? And Mem-Cho just sort of starts getting into her head, just being like, could it be that one girl who's always hated me, or that person I parted ways with after we had a fight? And as she's sort of just laying down here, she's like, oh man, I hate this. This kind of suspicion is what spoils your heart the most. And at this point, we sort of cut away from Mem-Cho's bedroom to the Strawberry Productions, or Ichigo Productions, whatever way you want to read it. If you want to take like how the anime sort of localizes it, or how the official Yin Press books say it, or if you take it however you want, I don't know, but we're at the Strawberry Productions headquarters, of course, where Ruby and Aqua and Miyako all live, and the sort of general headquarters. So we see Ruby and Mem-Cho are here, sort of having a little bit of a conversation, and we don't really get the idea, like, what the beginning of the conversation looked like, but we can, through some context clues, we can obviously tell they are talking about tabloids and all of that general type of stuff. As Ruby's just like, oh yeah, all of that, like, everybody seems to have a hard time with it at first, don't they, right? And Mem-Cho's just like, hey, don't say it like it's somebody else's problem, right? But she's like, this thing must hit you harder than anyone else, right? And Ruby says like, I mean, yeah, it does, but Miyako always protects me with all of her might. As we see a little bit of panel here of like a tabloid guy with a camera out, like facing into Ruby, and we almost see Miyako like as a banshee come up from out of nowhere and like get in the tabloid photographer's way. And I really like this panel as we sort of see like Miyako's like, roar! It was like, get out of the way! Like, I don't want to see all this. It's a little bit of an interesting panel. It just goes to show how great of a person Miyako is and how great of a mother she is to these two twins here. Of course, Aqua and Ruby. But Mem-Cho's just like, hey, well, aren't you grateful about that? And she's like, we don't get a response from Ruby. But she just continues saying like, hey, well, even if they found out about my age, it wouldn't have a big impact on Become Nahachi's activities anyway. And she's like, it would just lower my popularity by a lot. So it's not the worst of the worst, but if an article did come out, I am very sorry here in advance. And we sort of see that Mem-Cho says this as she sort of rests her head on the dining room table that they're talking at. And Ruby, who is standing up, sort of looking there at Mem-Cho, eventually just is like, hey, Mem-Cho, like, you decide to use your self-proclaimed high school girl status as a weapon for your activities and have been fighting with it, right? And she's like, well, here's the thing. We knew about it and we asked you to join us. So it isn't wrong of you to have to apologize to us at all, right? Like, we graciously let you into Become Nahachi, even knowing your age and all of this other situation here, right? And she just continues saying like, hey, you have skillfully navigated the entertainment industry with that weapon and helped us go viral many, many times. We respect your way of fighting. And she just continues saying like, hey, but I believe it. With the sensitivity that allows you to navigate the entertainment industry skillfully and that knows it has allowed you to pull a risky balancing act without a single scandal, you should be able to handle this situation well. As Mem-Cho sort of just hears her and looks up the Ruby and eventually just like says, "Oh, I see." And we suddenly cut the scene from there as we go back to Mem-Cho's apartment, or presumably wherever she goes to film her live streams, because I know some live streamers don't do it in their house but in other various different places. But oh, if I could breathe here, we see that Mem-Cho's sort of sitting in front of the camera, and we see that she has started up a live stream. And she's like, "Hey guys, today I've got a very important announcement to make, and also I need to apologize to you, right?" And throughout this sort of interaction here, we see the chat of the live stream just going on, and I think there are a few funny sort of chatters in this as it goes on. Is like one person like, "Oh my gosh, are you getting married? I hope it's a good announcement. Did she finally do it?" And we see one of these people says like, "Hey, I heard you were married to Arima," which, okay, yeah, I never thought that was a ship out in the Oshi-no-Ko-verse, especially in universe of all of these people just like, "Oh yeah, I heard you were married to Arima," just like, okay, that's a little interesting, but that's all it is. And Mem-Cho just sort of starts, he's like, "Hey, the truth is, I'm not 20 years old, I made myself younger on purpose, and I am so sorry." The chatters are just like, "Oh, what is this, for real? Like, oh man, no wonder your topic is so old-fashioned, and like, why are you making this public now?" And another person's like, "No one would have actually found you out if you have stayed quiet, like, why are you doing all of this, right?" And Mem-Cho just talks to the camera, just saying like, "Hey, my dream was to be an idol. Even though I was working as a YouTuber, I couldn't let go of that dream. So because I lied, I thought that if I wasn't young, people wouldn't accept me. If you can't forgive me, you can unsubscribe from my channel. I don't mind. I don't care what people say on social media." I just continue saying like, "Hey, thanks to this lie, I'm now able to work as an idol for becoming Hachi, which was my dream. I'm surrounded by agencies and teammates who have accepted me despite knowing everything, and I'm filled with joy. And that is why I don't want to hate myself for being a self-proclaimed high school girl." We got a few more gems as far as the chatters go. I love the first chatter we see here, which is like, "Oh no, Mem-Cho has a grandchild," right? Which I think is the logical conclusion for a lot of people to end up making these jokes. Of course she doesn't, but it's a funny thing to think about. A lot of people are just like, "Hey, well, a lie's a lie, sorry, I'll unsubscribe," and like, "I don't feel betrayed at all," and like, a lot of people are like, "Why'd you end up lying about it," right? And some people are like, "Well, she dreamed of being an idol, so I understand," and a lot of people are like, "Oh, yeah, yada, yada, yada," and a lot of people are like, "Oh, I'm glad you didn't announce your retirement," and a bunch of this other stuff. So we sort of see that both parties here, like, I understand why you did it, and none of us care, and the other half is like, I actually do care, so I'm actually going to do all of this, right? We see some more charges going like, "Hey, so your teammates students like, hey, as long as you don't cause trouble for everyone, I guess okay." Like, "Hey, that's who makes Mem-Cho who she is today." So we see a lot of decent and good supporters here, right? Mem-Cho just continues on with her little speech, just saying like, "Hey, that said, I don't think this kind of selfishness is acceptable. So in order to take responsibility, I challenge myself with this plan. Mem-Cho, YouTuber, whose age is unknown, is on her way to becoming a self-proclaimed college girl. This time I'll take the university entrance exam seriously, so I can finally earn a true identity," right? As we see that, there's a little paper here, and it says, like, "Oh, this is passed by Mem-Cho," right? Sort of saying, like, this is a plan, she's going to take action. We see a few more of these commenters here, just like, "Hey, I'm starting to get confused. Were there some tears there I just saw now?" Like, "Oh, it's a very cute plan, it's very nice," right? Some more people are like, "Oh man, it's been a charade all along," and a bunch of people are just being really supportive. And Mem-Cho says like, "Hey, I'm gonna keep going until I pass this exam," and she looks over to her screen, and she sees just a bunch of really supportive messages like, "Good luck, I'm gonna cheer for you. I didn't become your fan because I cared about your age anyway. Thank you for telling us." And we see that Mem-Cho is just very happy, and she's like, "Oh, thank you guys," and all of this sort of going on here. And she sort of like really starts to tear up a lot, as like just some tears are rolling down her face. And we see there's a bunch of other comments that she eventually looks at, and she's like, "Oh, so how old are you really?" And then she's like, "Hey, how rude, you're not supposed to ask a woman her age." Like, "Hey, my real age will remain a secret forever," right? And we see as a bunch of commenters again just going like, hey, it's important, like, hey, this is a pretty good chance a babyface Asian and YouTuber is born. We see another, do you have a grandchild, which is hilarious. And probably my favorite one is, well, speaking of personal preference, I hope you're in your 30s, which is just, yes, is a little weird, yes, but it is just a very funny thing, because I'm guessing this is not serious at all. It's probably done for more of the satirical value, so I do find that a little funny. But at that point, we see the last of Mem-Cho's live stream here, as we eventually cut over to... Where we cut over to, I'm not quite 100% sure. This could be anywhere from, again, like the Strawberry Productions headquarters, which I don't think it is because of the building that we see. I don't think necessarily this... No, this is definitely the Strawberry Productions building. What am I talking about? We cut back to the Strawberry Productions building, where we see that Kana is now talking with Mem-Cho. And we see that Kana is scrolling through her phone and reading an article about Mem-Cho's recent live stream, where she, of course, did all of this broadcasting stuff, right? I was like, hey, I'm not my age, and we sort of see, like, the articles like, hey, famous YouTuber Mem confesses to age fraud and receives sympathy for her situation. So we see that, like, she ended up getting a lot of support from this, right? And Kana is sort of just like, oh, so I see you did pretty well here, right? And she's like, this way, even if your real age was exposed in a tabloid, it wouldn't cause an uproar because you made yourself seem younger on purpose to sell yourself, right? And Mem-Cho's like, yeah, this is what they ended up calling, like, offense is the best defense, because, of course, she took action into her own hands here to make sure that all of this stuff didn't happen, right? And we see that Kana's like, hey, and they even gave you, like, a new attribute idea, age unknown idol YouTuber. Like, she's like, man, you really did well for yourself here, right? And Mem-Cho's just like, yeah, if you turn right, you get criticized. If you turn left, you get flamed. In the entertainment industry, where everyone is forced to be a pure and innocent saint, I'll remain in the gray area and swim through it brilliantly. And kind of just like, oh, I see. And she's like, I mean, that's very good for you, I guess. She's like, your channel seems to be growing as well, so I have nothing negative to say, right? And Mem-Cho's like, hey, I wouldn't mess that up, of course. After all, I may not look like it, but I'm a buzz queen. And on those words, that's where we end off this chapter of Oshi no Ko. And yeah, this is definitely a chapter that is a closure to Mem-Cho's story arc. Of course, throughout this whole series, the whole deal with Mem is that she has sort of lied about her age to get into this situation and to find out her dream that she wanted to get into. And this is sort of wrapping up all of those plot points in one chapter, right? Okay, she had fears about the tabloids following her and figuring this out. So she ended up taking actions into her own hands after that talk she had with Ruby and going through and using that idea of offense is your best defense. Now, I don't really know how Japan's entertainment landscape is, if they would have accepted this differently, and also, there's no way to know how this would have gone. Of course, I am from America, United States of America, so I don't know how this would have actually worked in our society, either in the English-speaking countries, how this would have actually gone down, because that's just a terribly and hard thing to predict and figure out. So there's a lot of moving parts here, but I mean, I did like this chapter. The end of the chapter is a little weird. I have never, like, it would be better if Mem-Cho, like, throughout the series had the idea built up of, oh yeah, Mem-Cho is the Buzz Queen. Of course, we've seen, like, yes, during her first arc where she was introduced, the Love Today, I think was what that dating show is called. We saw, of course, whenever they released a video of all of the stuff with Akane, sort of show how she was part of their value team and how none of the cast actually hated her. Seeing how that went down, we saw that she, of course, she knew her social media skills and all that other stuff, but we've not necessarily seen her, like, have the moniker of the Buzz Queen, and I feel like if that was used more throughout the series, this would have had, like, more of an impact, like, oh, look at that, it's so crazy, so insane, but I don't think this is a bad chapter by any means. It wraps up Mem-Cho's story arc, and probably in the best way it can. Mem-Cho's going to be going to college, so she's got to sort of growing into a new era of her identity, so very interesting. And I mean, there is a lot of critique of this chapter, but I feel like I've gone over all of the main points I have. her wrapping up her story arc. And again, the Frill stuff in the beginning is mainly just to get the plot rolling, to have Mem-Cho think about all of this and realize it. The Ruby talk is more for Mem-Cho to realize, like, hey, we're all supportive of you, so believe in yourself and believe in your fans. You've done a whole lot here. And the Kana talk at the end is more just like, hey, good job. You reaffirmed yourself as a big person and are continuing to grow. Good job. And that's really all there is to this chapter. As far as the next chapter goes, I'm not necessarily so sure what we're going to be getting. We always could start, of course, with the whole Nino situation and start to get more into that. Or at the same time, we can just as easily do another one of these sort of epilogue, not epilogue chapters, wrapping up a character's story arc in a chapter. So, like, next time we could take on Taiki Himakawa, or next time we could take on Melt. Or we could just do, like, a little bit of a more slice of life chapter before the whole, oh man, Nino's situation that's going on here. So, Oshi no Ko, still good series, still got a lot of moving parts, and this series definitely isn't over in, like, the next 4 chapters, as I was predicting at one point. Like, man, with everything getting revealed here, Oshi no Ko may only have, like, a few chapters left. I definitely say it's got this and then another volume, which would end up being, like, 170 chapters, like 14 chapters, but I digress. We don't need to be getting into that talk right now, because, of course, I had that talk earlier for, like, My Hero Academia, whenever it was, because it has ended the day after I have recorded this video, and today this video is probably going out, all things considered, and it has had a situation where, oh, the second last volume had, like, 13 chapters in it because of how they did it, so, okay, the last volume only has, like, 8 chapters, which isn't actually enough to make a book, so, and they ended the series, so what's going on here? So, a lot of different interesting stuff going on here. Good chapter of Oshi no Ko, not the best, not the worst either, but sort of that, like, a middle, like, solid, probably 6.5, 7 chapter, ends off a story arc, decent enough, still good, and yeah, I really don't have too much else to say at this point. I've literally gone over every point I had multiple times, so thank you guys for watching this Oshi no Ko chapter review. Again, this was chapter number 146. If you did like this review, I've got plenty of other Oshi no Ko chapter reviews on the channel, so there'll be a playlist link down in the description down below, and also an end card on this video where you can tap to see all of the playlist of all of the videos I've done so far, so go check some of those out if you want to hear my thoughts on the like original audition for who's going to play the role of I in the 15-Year Lie movie. Well, I did reviews on all of those chapters, and nothing really before that, but that's sort of where I started, and everything from there to current. So, yeah, please go check those out, and if you do enjoy all of the videos, hope you mind subscribing, and leaving a comment down below if you know the meme title of this chapter, and yeah, I really don't have too much else to say. Thank you guys again for watching, and yeah, this has been Oshi no Ko chapter number 156, titled Meme. I'll be back next time for chapter number 157. This will be Glowplasma 231, signing out.